Group portraits are some of the most important images that we'll take as portrait and wedding photographers, yet it's also one of the most frequently asked questions that I get both here on this channel and in my photography program, Shoot to Edit. How do I get tack sharp images of groups? Who do I focus on? What settings should I use? And what the heck is a focus plane? And why should you care? Blurry images are the one thing that we can't fix in post. So in this video, I'm gonna be answering these questions and more so that you can go out and confidently rock super sharp group portraits. Hey guys, I'm excited to be coming your way with a whole slew of new videos that I'm working on and I just can't wait to share. But today's video is actually part of a series all on how to get sharper portraits. In previous videos, I talked about subjects such as how to calibrate your lenses, how to get sharper portraits after the fact in Lightroom, and also how to shoot wide open with super low apertures and still nail tack sharp focus. So if you haven't seen those videos yet, I'll link them in the description below to check out after this video. In this video, we're talking groups. Shooting groups of more than 2 people comes with a whole slew of new challenges, especially when it comes to getting sharp professional looking images without losing that dreamy bokeh in our backgrounds that we love as portrait photographers. And with the nature of fast moving portrait sessions where you have lots of kids or wedding days where timelines are tight and you have a lot of photos to get through, it has new challenges that come up where, versus 1 to 2 people to focus on looking great, now you have 6, 8, 10, 20 people that you're trying to get looking their best in a singular frame. If you're fumbling with your camera settings or don't know what you're doing on these fast-paced shoots, not only do you run the risk of looking unprofessional, but really, you can run into the nightmare situation where you get home and realize your images are soft or out of focus and there's no way of recovering them. And that's why it's so important to really have this be a second nature. But I will say that it doesn't need to be hard. And that's what we're gonna talk about in today's video, kind of some tips and a system that you can have in place so that you can confidently go on your shoots and not have to worry about fumbling with settings and feel more confident. So with that, let's dig into tip number 1. So tip number 1 is to align the toes. So when it comes to photographing groups of people, especially larger groups of 8 or more, what tends to happen is towards the end, people tend to bend in. And with that, these people on the ends will be out of focus, especially if you're shooting at a lower aperture such as 2.08 or even sometimes at 3.5, they might be out of focus. So we want to get everybody on that same plane of focus by aligning their toes. And so what I do is I focus on the middle person or couple and have everybody on the outside line up their toes with them. It helps if there's some sort of floor marker. I always look to see if there's something on the ground, such as a line in the concrete, if they're on concrete or brick that they can line up with. But if not, they're able to quickly line up their toes and then I'm able to take a peek and make sure that we still aren't getting any curve. And what I usually do is just with my hands, direct people to step back a little bit more on this end or this end until they're in that perfect line. Tip number 2 is to focus on the person's eyes that are in the middle and also closest to the camera. And the reason for this is typically with super large groups, we're going to possibly need more than 1 row. And then the question becomes, which person do I focus on? I know I should focus on the middle person, but do I focus on the person in that first row or that second row? And the reason you want to focus on the first row is because the way focus works, roughly 1/3 of your focus is going to fall towards the front of the focus point and 2/3 is going to fall behind the focus point. So if you focus on the person that is closer to the camera, you're more likely to have more of the people in focus without needing to raise up your aperture setting more than needed. That way you retain more of that bokeh and those blurry backgrounds that we really love while also getting the people in tack sharp focus. Number 3 is to be very careful to align the angle of your lens to the line of your subject. And the reason for this is the importance of plane of focus, which we talked a bit about in a previous video, I'll link up here, where I talked about the plane of focus being similar to that of a sheet of paper that goes outward based on the angle of your lens and follows the angle of your lens. And what happens if we are slightly off angle from the line of our subjects is, even if we're focusing on that center middle person, the people towards the ends will actually be out of focus because they're outside that plane of focus based on that angle of the lens. So we want to be very careful to have that angle perfectly aligned with the line of our subjects. Next up, I just wanted to touch on lens choice when it comes to photographing groups and family portraits. And the main lens that I use for that is the 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8. And I'm usually shooting it around the focal range of between 35 to 50. This of course depends on my environment and how far back I have to step to be able to, crop in a little bit tighter and still get everybody's full bodies head to toe. But if you are shooting prime, I'd probably recommend either a 50 millimeter if you have enough space for it, or a 35 millimeter. But the 24 to 70 is very versatile, and I love it for family portraits because I'm able to zoom in a little bit tighter and get those tighter crops, and also ensure that I'm able to get everybody in the frame when I have these bigger families, even when I have tighter spaces. But for more creative group portraits, I'll then switch to my 85 millimeter 1.4. And these are your more creative pictures where it's maybe like a siblings photo, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, where you're wanting to get a bit more creative shot and that really beautiful depth that you can get when shooting at shallow apertures. And for this, I'm usually cropped a bit tighter versus that full body portrait that I'm getting with the 24 to 70. With the 85, you have a bit more compression, it's a tighter lens. So I'm not typically getting a full body with this lens. And I'm also playing around with more natural looking images where people are laughing, maybe they're looking at each other. So this is definitely for more of those creative portraits, and the 24 to 70 is the perfect lens for those nice classic full-bodied portraits looking right at the camera. And finally, I wanted to touch on settings, and specifically your shutter speed and aperture that you should be using when shooting groups. And for shutter speed, I typically keep this around 1/200th of a second. That way I don't have any motion blur when shooting groups from them moving or me moving in any camera shake. But the general rule of thumb with shutter speed is you want it to be at least double the focal length of your lens. So that's a good rule of thumb to live by, but I generally keep it 1/200th and above for group portraits. And then when it comes to aperture, this is actually one of the biggest questions that I get when it comes to shooting groups. Because the important thing when doing a nice classic traditional group portrait where everybody's eyes are looking at the lens is that you want all of the eyes in focus. So what I find is that I really love bokeh in my images, and so I really love having that depth. So I often shoot wide open, even with group portraits. So that's why it's so important to keep everybody's toes in a line. And for groups of around 6 people, oftentimes as long as I can line them up, I'm still shooting at 2.8 to get that beautiful depth in my images. And then for larger groups over 6 people, where you might have them staggered or maybe have multiple rows, I'll bump things up to 3.5 or even f4. So typically for group portraits, that's kind of the range I live in, anywhere from f2.8 if I have a single row to f4 for the bigger group portraits where you have extended family. And then every now and then we have a really large group portrait where we'll capture everybody from one side of the family, all of the bride's family or all the groom's family, or especially for intimate weddings, we'll capture everybody together for one big group portrait. And for those, I might bring the aperture up even more to something like f5.6 or even f8. 8, depending on how far back the people go. Again, keeping in mind the focus plane. So the further back from that focus point the people go, the more they will fall out of focus. And that's when you'll want to raise up the aperture. And then for the more creative photos, I will shoot with the 85mm 1.4, and I will shoot it wide open at 1.4 oftentimes, anywhere from 1.4 to f2. And as long as everybody is perfectly lined up, they're still tack sharp with those smaller groups. Or I just for those more creative photos where they're interacting and having fun, it's okay if the people towards the sides go slightly out of focus if they're not looking at the camera, as long as you have that main focus point tack sharp. Last, I just have a quick bonus tip to share that is surprisingly simple, yet is actually a huge difference maker between being confident on your shoots and nailing focus to being put in a nightmare situation of getting home and realizing that a lot of your images are blurry or out of focus. But first, if you're new here and are interested in more photography, editing, and business tips to grow your photography business, I'd encourage you to subscribe. It's one of the best ways that you can support my channel, and it'll keep you in the loop for future videos like this one. So the last bonus tip is to confidence check your images. Now, I know that this sounds so simple, but it's the one thing that can be a huge difference maker, because I see so many photographers that get home from their shoots and they will tell me that they're mortified that the photos are ruined and they don't know what to do because they're out of focus or blurry, and they didn't realize that it was a problem when they were on location. And I get this because I've been there too. I know the horror of getting home and being like, oh my gosh, I have to deliver this to my clients, because you can't not give them those images. And sometimes they're only slightly soft, and then sometimes they're way soft. So a huge way of not running into this problem is to confidence check while on location. And this can be super quick with a DSLR. You can just look on the back of your LCD, and with mirrorless, it's even simpler. While looking through your viewfinder, you can really quickly check the image, and I have it just one click to zoom in to 100%, one click to zoom back out, and then you can keep shooting. The other thing with this is you're able to also very quickly kind of look through the images and ensure that with large groups, you will get people blinking, and you can ensure that you have one image where everyone looks perfect, all eyes are open, and this will save you a ton of time in editing, not wanting to do eye replacements and stuff like that because you didn't get one image where everybody's eyes were open. So not only can you ensure sharp images, but also you can ensure that you get good images in camera. I'll usually take a few shots when doing group pictures just because of the eye thing. Do that quick confidence check and then move on. So let's recap. For super sharp group portraits, we want to first ensure that all the toes are in a perfect line. Then we want to focus on the person that is center and closest to the camera. And next, make sure that the angle of our camera is aligned with the line of our subjects. And for lens choice, I'm typically shooting group portraits with a 24 to 70mm lens, and then using an 85mm lens for more of those creative group portraits. And for the settings for that, we'll be shooting anywhere from 2.8 to f4 for the majority of the images, sometimes bumping up to 5.6 or even f8 for the super large group portraits of everybody together. And then for the creative shots, I'm typically shooting wide open at f1.4 with a shutter speed of 200th or higher to ensure that we're not getting any motion blur. And then finally, I'm doing that quick confidence check just in camera, usually looking right through the viewfinder for mirrorless and zooming in with just one click at 100%, zooming back out, and then moving on. So by doing all this, you will be able to go into your shoots and confidently get super sharp group portraits every single time. But if you're still having trouble getting sharp images, it's possible it's your gear. So if you need more help around focus, definitely check out the other videos I have in this series where I talk about troubleshooting some common focus issues and also how to calibrate your lens. And if you have any other questions around this, drop them in the comments. I'm here to help. And also, question of the day, what is your favorite lens when shooting groups? I'd love to know, so share it below and I will catch you in the next video.